Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is 2100 hours on this Tuesday evening. A very good evening to you. Warm welcome. This is Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African Perspective. I am Tsepiso Makwetla as we bring you the latest news in and around the continent and bringing you the voices, the perspectives and the news that matter. We cover the latest developments from the heart of Africa to all corners of the globe. We'd like to hear from you what is happening in your world, what is happening within your community, the opinions and the discussions shaping your environment. So we start off first with the top stories. We start in Nigeria, where prosecutors have arraigned 5 men accused of the 2022 attack on a Catholic church in Owo, Ondo State, which left at least 50 people dead and over 100 injured. The suspects, Idris Omeza, Al-Qasim Idris, Jamu Abdul Malik and Abdul Halim Idris, and suspects Momo Otuho Abubakar, appeared in a federal high court in Abuja on terrorism charges. They pleaded not guilty and were remanded in custody of the Department of State Services. Channel Africa's correspondent in Nigeria, Jonathan James Liamongon, has more.
They've been arraigned on 9 bordering on terrorism. It is being waited to see how far-reaching that will go, because up until the more recent terrorism law in Nigeria, one of the things that the military, especially, for instance, has said they've struggled with is the laws are not extensive enough. When they do pick up a suspect, they find it hard to be able to fully prosecute them. Top amongst the charges is them killing people.
And Associate Fellow at Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi, India, Samir Bhattacharya, says India is unlikely to stop buying crude oil from Russia. This follows reports suggesting that Indian state refineries are increasingly relying on Nigerian crude oil to make up supply gas. India has been accused of aiding Russia's efforts in its purchases. Bhattacharya says Saudi Arabia, Iraq and the US have been India's main suppliers of the oil, and Nigeria has always been part of the diversification.
Despite all these sanctions, Russian oil proved very cheap for India, and all this oil, the crude oil that India bought from Russia, it was refined in India, it was sold back to Europe. So I really don't think Russian oil will be, buying Russian crude oil will be stopped. But what is going to happen is there is a need for diversification.
Thousands of civilians have fled their homes in a tribal district in the northwest of Pakistan as security forces resume an operation against militants. Reports say troops used helicopter gunships to carry out the attack.
We're looking at opportunities in the agricultural space, in the livestock, as you see halal everywhere. These are the opportunities that our people can really exploit. But more importantly, there are other issues. If you're looking at the engineering capabilities of Pakistanians, if you're looking at the technology space, and therefore we are saying we can collaborate.
And various stakeholders gathering in Johannesburg for the Pakistan-South Africa Trade Summit. You heard there the voice of South Africa's Small Business Minister Stella Ndabeni saying sectors like agriculture offer good opportunities for trade with Pakistan. So back to that story about Pakistan and thousands of civilians who fled their home in a tribal district northwest of Pakistan as security forces continued their operation against militants. Reports say troops used helicopter gunships and mortars to target suspected militants' hideouts in Bajour district. The BBC's Ambarasan Eteriajan has more.
Amid increasing attacks on its troops, the Pakistani military has launched an operation against the insurgents in Bajour district that borders Afghanistan. The security drive that began late last month was paused within a day after tribal elders tried to broker peace. But talks with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan group ended in deadlock, with the insurgents refusing to retreat from civilian areas to go to Afghanistan.
And European Union leaders have issued a joint statement saying that Ukraine must have the freedom to decide its own future amid concerns that Kiev is being sidelined from Friday's summit between the US and Russian governments. The statement, which was not endorsed by Hungary, also says meaningful peace negotiations may only take place in the context of a ceasefire. Michael Galla, who is the member of the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Ministers Committee, says Donald Trump has a clear goal to meet.
I hope he comes out of this talk on Friday, making it clear that both the Europeans, the Ukrainians and the US push Putin not only to a ceasefire, but also to agree to meaningful negotiations that are in the framework of international law.
And the African Civil Aviation Commission has confirmed that the future of aviation in the African continent is promising. It was speaking on the sidelines of a 3-day ICAO Next Generation of Aviation Professionals Global Summit currently being held in Durban, South Africa. The Secretary General of the Commission, Adefunke Adeyemi, had this to say.
We are projecting that we're going to have over 300 new routes connecting African cities over this period of time. And we're also projecting that we're going to carry an additional 66 million passengers.
1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And just coming up on the program, we will be telling you about that national dialogue that starts in South Africa tomorrow. It'll take place tomorrow and Friday. A long anticipated post-democracy discussion, especially given the challenges that the government of national unity has been facing. And of course, years of corruption, mismanagement, and all kinds of crises that government is not meeting in terms of its social contract with South Africans. So we'll be speaking with the Moses Kotane Foundation about what to expect from those talks and what really should be center stage as various organizations pulled out of those talks. So we move on to other news for now, where while welcoming efforts by the United States towards ending Russia's war against Ukraine, European Union leaders, as we mentioned, have asserted that the people of Ukraine have the freedom to decide what they want for their future, and a warning that a path to peace cannot be without a ceasefire. Now, the EU made its position known in a statement issued earlier on Tuesday as preparations and parameters for a summit between Russia's President Vladimir Putin as well as US President Donald Trump take shape. President Putin takes shape on Friday morning, this meeting rather, with the US and the state of Alaska. Suggestions from Trump that there would be land swaps between Kiev and Moscow are part of the future peace arrangement that is under discussion, definitely being dismissed by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky after it emerged that Putin could agree to a ceasefire in return for major territorial concessions by Ukraine. More from my colleague Sherwin Bryce Peace.
As anticipation builds for a meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin, the White House has signaled that they are planning for the Friday summit without the attendance of Ukraine's president at Russia's request, while a possible trilateral summit is something the U.S. remains open to. Listen to President Trump.
This is really a feel-out meeting, a little bit. And President Putin invited me to get involved. He wants to get involved. I believe he wants to get it over with. Now, I've said that a few times, and I've been disappointed because I'd have like a great call with him, and then missiles would be lobbed into Kiev or some other place, and you'd have 60 people laying on a road dying. But I'm going to meet with him. We're going to see what the parameters are. I'm then going to call up President Zelensky and the European leaders. Right after the meeting, yeah. And I'm going to tell them what kind of a deal. I'm not going to make a deal. It's not up to me to make a deal.
European Union leaders are expected to hold a virtual summit with Trump Wednesday to focus on pressure options against Russia. addressing issues related to Ukraine's territories seized by Russia, security guarantees for Ukraine, and how the potential peace talks might play out. EU spokesperson Ariana Podesta.
Right now, we are focusing on the preparation of this meeting. We will have calls tomorrow among leaders. The position is clear. We welcome the efforts by President Trump to reach peace for Ukraine, a peace that is just and lasting and respects sovereignty and territorial integrity. And in this sense, we are working with Ukraine to make sure that this is kept in mind in the meeting of Friday. Anything else is pure speculations at this stage.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed Tuesday that Russia was merely using Friday's summit to buy time and was preparing for new offensive operations, while balking at the notion of territorial swaps.
President Donald Trump announced preparations for his meeting with President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, very far away from this war, which is raging on our land, against our people, and which can't be ended without us, without Ukraine. Of course, we will not reward Russia for what it has perpetrated. The Ukrainian people deserve peace, but all partners must understand what a dignified peace is. The answer to the Ukrainian territorial question already is in the Constitution of Ukraine. No one will deviate from this, and no one will be able to. Ukrainians will not gift their land to the occupier.
A senior Kremlin aide, Yuri Yushakov, confirmed the Friday meeting that would focus on achieving a long-term peaceful resolution to the war.
Alaska and the Arctic are regions where the economic interests of our countries intersect, and there are clear prospects for implementing large-scale, mutually beneficial projects. Of course, the presidents themselves will undoubtedly focus on discussing options for achieving a long-term peaceful resolution to the Ukrainian crisis. In conclusion, I would like to note that in the coming days, Moscow and Washington will certainly devote themselves to the most active and intense preparations for the practical and political aspects of the Alaska summit. This will evidently be a challenging process, but we will engage in it actively and energetically.
As Europe and Ukraine seek to shape White House positions ahead of Friday's Alaska meeting, as explained by research fellow at the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House, Jaroslava Barbieri.
European leaders are currently trying to strike a tricky balance between trying to keep the US on board because they are still dependent on US military assistance to some degree. They are only now gradually trying to bolster their defense capabilities and acquiring more independence from the US security umbrella. But on the other hand, indeed, they understand that they might have that there will be tensions between the US position and European leaders' position on what a durable ceasefire and acceptable terms for ending the war in Ukraine might be. So that is the tricky balance that European leaders are currently trying to navigate, and Ukraine is fully aware of this.
Expectations of a deal to emerge from the Alaska meeting remain slim, given the absence of Ukraine's leader from the summit, with President Zelensky emphatic that no decisions concerning Ukraine's future and the security of its people could be made without Ukraine's participation, as he pressed for sanctions to be strengthened against Russia as a pressure tactic to get Moscow to address substantive issues on ending the war. The United Nations has also insisted that any peace arrangement be in line with the UN Charter, General Assembly resolutions, and international law. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
And that brings the time to just about 15 minutes past 9. We continue now with one of the top stories that really has been a big part of public discourse and dialogue here in South Africa. And of course, those watching democratic developments here in South Africa. We are speaking here about South Africa being at a crossroads, and 30 years into democracy, there have been questions about progress. Undeniable though it has been, there have also been deep, persistent challenges from unemployment and poverty to gender-based violence and inequality. In fact, the unemployment figures came in today as well, shocking figures just in terms of the state and the level of unemployment in this country. So in the spirit of stalwarts who fought for our freedom, The Stalwarts Foundations Forum, a collective of foundations honoring names like the Moses Kotane, Lillian Ngoyi, Charlotte Maxeke, and others, they've been calling for a citizens-led national dialogue to confront these issues head on. And to speak about this national dialogue that it's set to take place in South Africa, even though several organizations, key organizations, have pulled back who are supporting this. The dialogue starts tomorrow and continues until Friday. So let's hear now from Steve Mashia from the Moses Kotane Foundation to speak to us about the forum's vision, the lessons that they can draw from stalwarts in the past, and how these dialogues can pave the way for a united and prosperous South Africa. Mr. Mashia, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
A very good evening, and good evening to your viewers at home.
I want to just start with the current state of where we are with this national dialogue. The president obviously making the pronouncement that it will go ahead, despite several organizations, foundations, entities, civil society organizations, some of them were even prominent people who had committed to taking part, pulling out of this. Your thoughts about the value that will be drawn from this? Is there still going to be value, given that there have been key South Africans, foundations, organizations that have withdrawn from this dialogue because they say, to put it mildly, say it's going to be an echo chamber. It's going to be another ploy by government just to garner votes, but no dialogue, so to speak, that will take place. Your thoughts about this?
Thank you very much. We, as the Stalwarts Foundations of the our Stalwarts, as the forum, says, we feel that first we need to thank the president for allowing the process to continue, and then also to then note some of the challenges that other foundations have came across, and they have spoke about around the challenges that they foresaw, or they have spoken about, and we don't take that light, but we as the forum feel that it is important that for when there are challenges in a process, it is very important that we don't lose focus of the entire intent of the entire process, because when you look at this national dialogue, it's very important, for the country to then engage honestly and in earnest, moving forward. So we feel there are important, voices that needs to be heard, that actually would assist and help, the country, to move forward. As we always say, there is no government without people. It is a government of the people, and surely it must be a government by the people.
So this is being convened under Section 83 of the Constitution, is understood to be a structured framework that allows for public intervention to be inclusive and deliberate on South Africa's future government. There have been, as I mentioned, 6 legacy institutions that have withdrawn from this dialogue because of what they object to, not only the lack of transparency in terms of financial resources, but they feel that it could have been moved forward because it appears to be rushed at this point. But most importantly, they feel that the conversation should not be led by government. I'd like to hear your thoughts and the thoughts of those that you are in unity with in attending this national dialogue.
Our position is that we need to continue engaging, no matter the challenges that are there. Like I have indicated, we have noted some of those important, observations that have been, brought forth. But we feel the only way to solve problems is to, engage within the very same challenges. And our position as the Stalwarts Foundations Forum is then to say, as the forum, we then foster the position and posture that this whole process must be, people's driven, and it must be, structured from bottom up, not from up down. So, and we can only achieve that when we continue to engage, to make sure that we then, speak to and acknowledge, the fact that we are where we are organizationally and logistically, to make sure that this process continues. But then we can only make sure that it then gets to be steered and redirected accordingly when and once we are part of, the entire process.
But do you feel that what you will be attending will be a conversation that is led by the people, a bottom-up conversation?
Yes, we are quite confident based on the brief that we then received on a meeting that we had yesterday about the state of readiness, where it was being made clear, and I think also on the a platform where there was a media, a press statement by the leader of, the task interim teams. What is happening is that, in our understanding, is that this convention is going to lay a ground for the formal, structure then to be engaged and elected. That we are saying, we are advocating that it should be bottom up and not from up down. And also, we then were briefed on other elements of involvement of government in assisting that this process has to be where it is. And based on the brief that we got, we are quite confident that all is not lost, and with our involvement continuously not necessarily taking over, but strengthening already the work that has been done by the other foundations, that has been part of this process, that we will achieve that what we are then looking for, which is to say this must indeed be a process led by the people on the ground.
So are you suggesting that, to your understanding, this is a precursor almost, the dialogue before the dialogue, to ensure that the foundation is exactly what it's intended to be?
It is exactly as you have outlined in our understanding and brief, and that is why we are confident that it now gives confidence to then say it is not a process that has been planned and then handed over to the people. It is a process that is going to engage the people, so that the people are then able to then say, this is the process we want, and this is the structure that we would be comfortable with, and these are the processes that would like the entire process to be undertaken before the actual dialogue can actually commence.
And I this is not a criticism of the effort to lay the groundwork for civil society, for citizens of South Africa to lead a dialogue on some of the crises that we're contending with. But one of the biggest criticisms has been that of a bill of 700 million rand. I know the presidency has clarified, according to its office, the funding. But you know, the unemployment figures were released today, and I'd imagine a lot of South Africans thinking, if some of that money could be channeled my way, not only to be able to get a job. I know there are already several grants that South Africans are receiving, but I think there are a lot of South Africans who feel aggrieved because they feel like the price tag is way too steep for something that may not even result in immediate remedial action.
Like I indicated, we cannot, before we engage, either criticize or necessarily, advocate for something that we don't have full facts of, but we note, the general challenges that our communities and our people face. Our country is going through a whole lot of challenges, like you said, issues of unemployment, issues of poverty, inequality, landlessness. There are a lot of issues, gender-based violence. Our communities are struggling with, issues of substance abuse. There are a lot of challenges. And that is why we then feel as the forum that when we then participate and lead in influencing the structural outlook, would assist in making sure that the challenges that are faced by our country are then being taken care of and being addressed. When you talk about issues of the possible funds that has been in the mainstream around a lot of money, like you are indicating, the brief that we received is that it's for that reason that government looked in ways that there could be cost cutting. That is why when they actually briefed, they indicated to us that some of the services logistically that will be provided will be not necessarily be paid for, will be services that would be sponsored by some of the companies and organizations.
And then, Mr. Mashia, finally, what you are saying with the various foundations that you are aligned with and you're going into this dialogue with is that you say you don't want scripted narratives, you want brutally honest conversations. Given the many social ills, particularly the lawlessness that we face that has led to murder, abuse of women and children and the elderly, and so many myriad others, South Africans don't feel safe. And as we mentioned, the poverty levels, the socio-economic challenges we face. What would that sound like when we say brutally honest? We want a constructive conversation, but what would brutally honest sound like?
In our view, brutal honest is we need to, as people, before as organizations and before as government and before as representatives, we need to be honest and take stock of our country, where it comes from, where it is, and where we want it to go to. And have, like you indicated, that it's our statement, brutal and honest engagements that talks to issues of corruption, that talks to issues of service delivery, that we feel government by now would have done far more better than it has done, and still acknowledging the work that government has done, but saying there is a lot that still can be done so that the lives of our people and the future generations can be safe.
All right. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Dr. Mashia. Much appreciated. And of course, we will be keeping a close eye on those developments as the talks that National Dialogue kicks off at UNISA tomorrow and continues until Friday. That's Steve Mashia from the Moses Kotane Foundation, part of the Stalwarts Foundations Forum that will be attending those talks.
The Upside, your afternoons just got even better.
Bantu Biko Street by Simpiwe Dana. Ndi ready. Simpiwe, 20 years in song. So what emotions come up when you hear that, hey, you've been doing this for 20 years now?
It almost feels like no time has passed, eh? I just, I know obviously time has passed, but I don't feel it. Even about my age, I'm 45. I always get shocked when I think, oh my God, in 5 years' time, I'll be 50. Because for me as an artist, it's almost like when it comes to certain things, time stands still. And as a result, you find that a lot of artists are very childlike, which, helps them to always have a fresh approach to issues.
I tell you what, I'm feeling healed just by that.
We take no sides, none whatsoever. We are the Upside.
The SABC is pleased to announce the launch of the new self-registration platform where vendors wishing to do business with the SABC can self-register on our internally developed platform. So vendors need to go to access this platform to our website. That is www.sabc.co.za/SABC/ and under e-tenders or self-register, just simply go to that, as we mentioned, https://e-tender.sabc.co.za. And all you have to do is follow the prompts. Visit SABC social media pages for more details.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
At 27 minutes to 10, we talk about a very important anniversary, and that is it's 76 years since the launch of the Geneva Conventions, the foundational international treaties that set rules to protect people during armed conflict. And of course, as we know, Africa has borne the brunt of that. To help us understand the importance of this anniversary, the challenges, and of course, a future in terms of today's complex wars, we're joined now by Professor Andrew Clapham, a leading expert in international humanitarian law at the Geneva Graduate Institute. Professor, firstly, let me thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. I do understand that we've cut into your vacation time, so we're even more grateful that you've taken the time to speak to us, to educate us, and of course, just to speak about this very important subject.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for your interest in the Geneva Conventions. As you say, I mean, they're foundational and they are supposed to protect the victims of war, but I don't think it will be news to your listeners that, of course, we're going through a catastrophic situation at the moment where we see and read about them being violated every day.
And let's just then start with the genesis of this 76 years ago. What was the context? What was the objective when setting up these statutes?
Well, it was the end of the Second World War, and after the Second World War, it was realized that there were a number of gaps in the hard law that was supposed to protect people, particularly the victims of war in times of armed conflict. And so there was a lot of updating done, for example, with regards to prisoners of war or the wounded or health workers and so on. But the big step forward was to ensure first that civilians would be protected, particularly in occupied territory. And secondly, that these laws would apply to civil wars, to, in the jargon, non-international armed conflicts. I mean, just to give you examples today, for Sudan and South Sudan, for example, there is provisions in the Geneva Conventions that apply directly to those conflicts. During the Second World War, it was just assumed that the laws of war applied to interstate conflicts, but a big step forward, as I say, was taken in 1949. And this is the law which is applied today to all armed conflicts around the world.
And as you speak about South Sudan, would you say 76 years on, this has been either one of the greatest failures or greatest lies behind the intention, whether intentionally or not, as we speak about the international law, humanitarian laws being violated, that of protection of humanitarian officials, for instance?
Well, I mean, yes, clearly there's a failure. The question is, where does the failure come from? In my view, it's not in the text. It's not even in the way it was designed in 1949. The failure is that the authorities, the international community, the Security Council, the African Union, the governments are not prepared to take action to ensure these rights are respected. We don't see people being prosecuted for war crimes. You don't see sanctions being imposed on individuals or entities that are refusing to abide by the Geneva Conventions. So I would sort of turn the question around and say, what are people doing to actually make this law effective and to punish those who violate it? It's not that the law itself has failed. I don't think there are really gaps in the Geneva Conventions that need to be filled. What we need is action and implementation and political will to take this stuff seriously.
So last year we saw a push by countries like Brazil, China, France, Jordan, Kazakhstan and South Africa launch a global initiative to renew political will for international humanitarian law. Was it because of those gaps that they saw, whether it be accountability or implementation? There obviously was something seen or perceived as wanting.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. And it's to be welcomed that states such as South Africa joined that initiative right from the get-go, from the beginning. The gap that they've identified is the failure to implement and the failure to take it seriously. And I mean, more prosaically, I suppose, the failure to educate troops and individuals in what all this means and why they should take it seriously. So it's a re-energization and a recommitment to these rules, recognizing that they're being violated. But states like South Africa and Jordan, Indonesia and others can do quite a lot to reinforce the rules. I'll give maybe one example. The Geneva Conventions have within them a regime called the grave breaches regime. It means that if anybody travels abroad who is accused of violating one of the Geneva Convention provisions that leads to a grave breach, they should be arrested and prosecuted in whatever country they happen to be visiting. That regime is very underused, misunderstood and not applied. But I think when governments like South Africa and France and others get involved, it means that they take seriously a visit from somebody to their country who, accused of grave breaches, ought to be punished rather than just let go on their way.
But then you've also seen countries who've either not signed some of these Geneva Conventions or who have withdrawn from them. So, as you say, the problem is not in the vision, but is it an issue of relevance?
Yeah, I'm going to maybe just for the record say, in fact, the Geneva Conventions are unique in the world in that they're the only treaties that everybody has signed. So every single state in the world is bound by them. And so far, nobody has withdrawn. So the problem is not there. The problem, as you're suggesting, is the sort of the failure to implement these existing obligations. And that's why this recommitment to make them better understood and better implemented is so important. So I can only hope that more and more states will take them seriously, but not just in terms of public statements and joining panels and so on, but take a hard look at their law and see if it's their own internal laws and see if it's fit for purpose. Do they have punishments for grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions? Are they ready to prosecute? Do they have war crimes units? Are they sanctioning individuals who fail to respect the Geneva Conventions? I think there's a lot that can be done. It's a sort of a bit of a sleeping beauty in a way, that it was adopted 76 years ago, as you said at the beginning. But it's really this year, remarkably, that people are making a bit of an effort to try to get them better respected.
So then, okay, let's talk about what respect then means in this case. So you say they've received universal ratification and that they're the only conventions in which all countries have signed. Does it mean that they are then blatantly being ignored in terms of the letter and the spirit of the laws of those conventions? If we take, for instance, the United States, when we talk about the humane treatment of prisoners of war, Guantanamo Bay was a subject of a discussion for many years and investigations, and yet the levels of accountability, it's not just the United States, there are many other countries. We're seeing now what is happening with Russia and Ukraine, who are speaking with Human Rights Watch about executions that some are seen as politically motivated, some even religiously motivated in Saudi Arabia and many other countries. So in those cases, what is happening? Are these signatories who are just blatantly ignoring the conventions of which they're co-signatories?
I mean, it's difficult to say that they're ignoring them, in that if we had somebody from the United States here now to explain the situation in Guantanamo, they would go through a lot of legal gymnastics to explain that these individuals were not prisoners of war and so they weren't violating the treaties and so on. But I mean, there's an obvious comeback that the principles in the Geneva Conventions did apply to those individuals. Even if not technically prisoners of war, it's illegal to torture people. And the United States would not deny that they had tortured individuals. Now, as you know, there's been a big investigation. Whether anybody has been prosecuted for the war crime of torture under the Geneva Conventions is another question, and you're right to raise it. Very few people have been prosecuted out of all of those incidents of torture in the wake of September 11 and the whole Guantanamo incident. So it's not the fault of the treaty as such, because it outlaws torture. It's not that they necessarily haven't signed it or they're trying to avoid it. It's that there wasn't the political will in the executive, in the president's office, to punish those as war criminals on their own side. So, it's the same for all states. I mean, Russia doesn't prosecute its own people for war crimes. Very few states do. I suppose that's why I was emphasizing the possibility of prosecuting someone when they travel abroad, rather than expecting states to do it, which it's their obligation to do. But for political reasons, it's not a good look when you're prosecuting your own people for war crimes. And in my experience, states tend not to do it.
What then is the role of multilateralism in holding states to account, looking at the Israeli military's response to Hamas, or terrorist organizations, as they say, being what is happening in Gaza?
I mean, there are, as you will know, efforts at the multilateral level to hold Israel and Israeli individuals to account. There's the case which has been brought by South Africa at the International Court of Justice against the State of Israel. And the International Criminal Court famously has issued arrest warrants against the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the now former Minister of Defense, for violations of the Geneva Conventions. So it's step by step. I think there will be more arrest warrants issued, I would presume, and states around the world are starting to sanction individuals from Israel, from elsewhere, from Russia, for violating the Geneva Conventions. Of course, they don't necessarily travel to the states that are sanctioning them. But the more states that get interested in ensuring that the Geneva Conventions are respected, the more people, I would hope, would start to think first before violating them.
But there's also the moral responsibility that is carried by signing the Geneva Convention. If you look at the International Criminal Court, it's come under criticism, heavy criticism, to a point of ladling sanctions on individuals of the ICC by the United States. So in such cases, can we still say organs of the spirit of the Geneva Conventions are still being respected, are still being taken seriously. And it's actually the perfect example right now, given the contentious issue of what is happening in Gaza and growing calls for genocidal acts to stop.
I mean, I can only agree with you. The international organs are under attack. As you say, the United States has sanctioned individuals from the International Criminal Court. That's one state that has done that. It doesn't mean that the International Criminal Court can't operate. It doesn't mean that other states are incapable of respecting the Geneva Conventions and prosecuting individuals who violate it. So, I mean, I don't want to make an appeal to the media, but how we tell the story affects how the Geneva Conventions get respected. If the story is, nobody seems to care about them anymore and no one is being punished, it's a dead letter, that starts to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we say, as you just said, everybody has signed them, everybody is bound to respect them, and those who violate them will be punished. It might not be tomorrow, but it will be at some stage. The prosecutions for some of the international crimes in Serbia or in Argentina, took a long time to happen, decades. But once you violate the Geneva Conventions and you commit a grave breach, that war crime sticks with you for the rest of your life, and you could be held accountable at any time.
And you're absolutely right in raising the fact and the issue around how we frame the narrative and what is happening with and around the Geneva Conventions. And it's precisely why I asked the questions about actions by the United States. We may say at this point that it's just one country, but we've seen a lack of a failure to sanction it for its actions. We've also seen some countries who've supported its actions. So it is important to get a sense of where the scales of justice, so to speak, lay and lie. Are people being vocal about what is happening around them? And it does boil down to accountability.
Yes, I mean, there has been some pushback against the United States for sanctioning a UN functionary recently. And the special rapporteurs have issued a press statement saying this is a blatant violation of the UN Convention on Privileges and Immunities. So I think, it's early days on some of these sanctions questions as to exactly what will happen. But I don't think it's the end of the Geneva Conventions, and I don't think it's the end of multilateralism. I think it's challenging, and it's a particularly dark moment in the history of the UN and the history of multilateralism, indeed in the history of the Geneva Conventions. And it's good that you're having this program so that they are sort of kept alive in a way, and we can begin to discuss, how they should be implemented rather than seeing them as a sort of historical interest.
So do they need updating? We live in a different world. Digitization is a big part of that. So when we talk about the respect of humanitarian law, especially by, in some cases, non-state actors. There's new and emerging technologies such as autonomous weapon systems, artificial intelligence. Are the conventions enough to hold those individuals that are either involved in programming, building, deploying, etc., etc.?
I mean, you ask a very good question. I mean, clearly, artificial intelligence was not around when the Geneva Conventions were written. And clearly, it poses a huge challenge for continuing to respect international humanitarian law. I think there are efforts now to write new texts, new treaties, if you like, add-ons to the Geneva Conventions. States are very excited about artificial intelligence and the potential it gives them to be more effective on the battlefield. And so far, progress has been rather slow in, if you like, slowing the progress of artificial intelligence. There is a real danger in that it can be used to speed up decision-making, get a lot of information, and give soldiers or commanders a great sense of confidence that the targeting they're going to be committing is within the rules. And I think those people who study this say that that is very, very dangerous because, one, it's going to be very opaque, the way in which artificial intelligence does this. And precisely as you say, if artificial intelligence makes the wrong calculation as to how many civilians deserve to die, who's going to be held accountable? Impossible to find the programmer, many years later. And you can't just sort of say, we'll give the death penalty to the artificial intelligence. It needs some real thinking about. States have started on this, but I fear personally that those who see the greatest advantage from using artificial intelligence will block any meaningful multilateral break on the use of artificial intelligence on the battlefield or in times of armed conflict. And I totally agree with you that it poses a huge challenge, which is not necessarily going to be resolved just by pointing to the Geneva Conventions.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Once again, much appreciated. As I said, we really appreciate you taking time out of your vacation. Professor Andrew Clapham, a leading expert in international humanitarian law at the Geneva Graduate Institute, speaking to us about that anniversary, 76 years since the establishment of the Geneva Conventions, the foundational international treaties that set rules to protect people during armed conflict. And that brings us to 9 minutes to 10.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
C'est notre invitée du jour, la belle Aïna Mwenze. Elle est là. Certaines l'appellent Boss Lady.
Bonjour Monsieur Jolino.
Parlez-nous un tout petit peu de vous.
Je m'appelle Boss Lady Aïna. Je mets l'accent sur le nom de Boss Lady parce que je mérite cela après le travail fait. Et c'est une rémunération en titre de la personne que je suis devenue aujourd'hui. Épouse et une mère de 4 garçons. Et voilà ce que je peux dire pour l'instant.
Et vous vous êtes lancé dans le business. Comment c'est venu?
En tant que mère et se retrouvant dans les pays étrangers, particulièrement en Afrique du Sud, je me disais que laisser les enfants sur la charge des travailleurs ou d'une bonne, ça serait pas très intéressant. Je me suis dit, bon, je dois essayer de m'organiser et trouver un emploi que je peux faire.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Well, we certainly hope that you've enjoyed the past 15 minutes as we brought you up to speed on what's happening across the world, the top stories. And we end with this. Today marking International Youth Day. It's celebrated under the theme Local Youth Actions for SDGs and Beyond across Africa. So young innovators are proving that practical skills and creativity can tackle some of the continent's most pressing challenges. We hear now from our reporter, Lebogang Mabange, what they're doing.
2 winners of the African Skills Revolution competition organized by AUDA NEPAD are showing how technical and vocational education and training, or TVET, can turn ideas into solutions. From Zambia, biomedical engineer Tiana Tiamike Piri says the competition pushed her to expand her expertise beyond the classroom and into real-world applications.
I have gained TVET skills through me studying biomedical engineering and also just self-learning for medical device development, given that in Africa, a lot of countries don't manufacture. And so I had to learn manufacturing process. From the time I got the award last year for the Africa Skills Revolution competition with AU, NEPAD, and Humana Skills competition. I have invested in different kinds of learning. Regarding research, I had to invest in learning how to conduct market research and also how to properly conduct research. I invested in presentation, public speaking, and also communication.
In Rwanda, Shauri Kalibata Jonathan found inspiration in an overlooked resource, banana stems. He says the idea came during his studies at Rwanda Polytechnique.
The idea of Ribanatex started during my studies at Rwanda Polytechnique in mechanical engineering, when we went to harvest bananas together with my colleagues, and I realized that only the fruit was valued, while the banana stems, full of potential in fibers, were left behind as a waste. With my skills in design and manufacturing, I started experimenting the ways to turn the wasted banana stem into textiles. My hope is that this will reduce environmental pollution, create a new income stream for farmers, and inspire other young innovators to see value where others see waste.
Jonathan adds that TVET has been key to shaping his skills and entrepreneurial mindset.
TVET is a game changer. It gives young people the hand-on skills not only to find jobs but to create them as well. And on my own journey, it gave me both the technical know-how and entrepreneurial mindset to design machines, develop products, and solve real community problems. When youth are equipped with practical skills, they become problem solvers and change makers.
Chairman of Humana People to People, Snorre Westgard, believes youth-led action is essential in driving sustainable community change.
Young people represent an enormous potential for action for change, as they are grounded in the communities they wish to see a change in. Organizations can provide a platform for the youth to get organized, get trained in necessary skills and capacities, and gain experience in how to lead and mobilize the whole community to take action.
He says these efforts are already making a difference, with young people stepping up in areas from public health to farming.
There are far too big gaps between lofty goals, unpractical ideas, and the reality on the ground. Young people can bridge this gap by finding practical solutions to challenges faced by the people. In Humana People to People projects, we have seen young people at the forefront of fighting HIV/AIDS and TB among the hard-to-reach communities. Others have started their own enterprises, improving food production and processing in farming communities.
As the world marks International Youth Day, these stories from Zambia and Rwanda show how African youth are turning skills into sustainable change. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Cette peur d'un point de non-retour nucléaire suffit-elle selon vous à légitimer une telle offensive, Monsieur Talati?
Absolument pas du tout. Cela fait plus de 30 ans que l'Israël crie haut et fort sur les toits, où il veut se faire entendre que l'Iran serait à 1 an pour obtenir l'arme nucléaire. Parfois, l'Iran serait à 6 mois. Parfois, l'Iran serait à 2 semaines pour obtenir son arme nucléaire. Et curieusement, jusqu'à ce jour, il n'y a toujours aucune preuve que l'Iran a obtenu cette arme nucléaire en dépit des déclarations d'Israël et de certaines puissances parfois.
Vue d'Afrique. Du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And that's how we wrap up the Tuesday edition of Africa World Hour. Of course, up next is Shayla Ndukumana with Hotlines. Let's find out what you can expect from them this evening. So, what's happening?
So, ma'am, before we get into what's happening, have you found the secret way to navigating to these studios? Apparently, there is a shortcut. And I was on a mission to find it. I failed today, but listen, I'll get it. When I do, I'll let you know. I thought
Are you sure?
I am sure.
I think, the people who tell you about shortcuts and you end up driving extra time. Beware the shortcut, my sister. That's all I can say to you. But if you do find it,
yes,
please let me know.
So on the show this evening, we're going to be touching on a rather sensitive matter, looking at the life and times of a Martin Pelders who has survived a severe childhood sexual abuse, beginning at the age of 5 into his adolescence, driving him into substance abuse. And he's going to share, of course, the victory behind it, but also urge men to speak up. I think what I found really grieving is stats saying that fairly 10 to 20% of the reporting, or what's being reported, is between 10 and 20%. So what are we missing? Where is that 80% of the reports that should be filed, right? And there was another study that was conducted by Matrix Men that stated that fairly 38 boys, or 38% of the boys that they had spoken to had said that they had experienced some kind of sexual abuse. However, when you look at the stats that are being reported, it's far lower than that. And so there's almost this gap between men speaking up and people taking it seriously that we want to address this evening.
what would be interesting, if you could please ask him this, is from the people that he's interacted with, and obviously he would have interacted with the statistics and communities within this quite a lot, is whether mindset has changed about abuse, particularly when it's from a man and when it's from a woman. Because if you go back several decades, there was a time and thinking when young men were being abused by older women, that they didn't see that as being abuse. They saw it as a rite of passage, as in they were actually having affairs with older women when actually it was abuse, but it was not categorized as that. It's only much later on in years when people start thinking about the trauma that they've incurred, because then they realize that relationship wasn't consensual. It wasn't a relationship at all. So it would be interesting to hear if there has been a change of mindset and how it's being handled now.
I agree with you 110%. It was something to brag about back then. And I wonder if men think on that now, is my question. Do you go back to that place to say, actually, this wasn't good for me, and it's turned me into somebody I wasn't supposed to become?
It's what we teach our children, that when a touch, a look, proximity feels like it's not right, it's not right. So even then, I think, being the bragging rights, it may be fine for that particular playground talk or whatever, but physically it did not feel right. Then mentally, later on, it is, emphasized in the sense that your body told you that it wasn't right. I mean, I'm just speaking from having read stories and listening to... education has changed. And therefore, educational material, and therefore how we teach, how we frame. So it would be interesting to hear from him.
Listen, he will answer all the questions, and we'll of course give him the platform to do so. That's what comes up on African Diaries. I heard you say hotlines, ma'am. The show name has changed. Just need to emphasize that.
Well, I've been away for a while. Nobody done told me that.
I know.
It would be good for you to tell me.
Ma'am. Okay. So the 411 is... We have moved from Heartlines. We are now African Diaries. It's the same concept, same stories. We just...
Hey, let's not embarrass ourselves on air by talking about when this happened between you and I, because we can see that there's a break in the chain.
No, it was recently, don't worry. It was very recent.
No, it must have been recently. Because,
as recent as yesterday.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because you didn't correct me yesterday.
You know what, Mem? I was huffing and puffing, and you're right.
Having said that, good night.